I'm working with Sean. So we obviously facilitate these SEM collaboration sessions. Sean not available to be here today. But yeah, we're going to discuss today the cost containment measures and the new cost containment measures, and then obviously the National Treasury, the travel framework. I'm going to introduce you very soon to Lindiwe. Lindiwe is working for the National Research Foundation. She's the manager then responsible for reporting and compliance at National Research Foundation, and she would be taking us through some of what they've been doing in terms of this new instructions. So yeah, I'm just going to have a few slides this morning just to introduce it, but really nothing that you kind of don't know about already. And then we're going to hand over to Lindiwe to talk about the instructions and the implementation within the NRF and their policy. And then we're going to open up for questions and any other discussions or things that you would like to add. Yeah, we are obviously recording as normally these sessions, and so if obviously if you do mind, then obviously you are free to leave. But yeah, so we're going to record the session. It's actually busy already. Okay, just in terms of the instructions, so there basically were two instructions, instructions 6 and 7. Instruction 6, obviously that's the National Travel Framework, and then instruction 7 then talks about cost containment within the travel environment, and then obviously mentioned that this instruction number 7 must be read in conjunction with instruction 6. Yeah, this applies to all PFMA institutions, so departments and all institutions where they want Schedule 1s, 2s, and 3s. This is effective from tomorrow. This particular instruction is effective from tomorrow, and it will publish right at the beginning of July. Okay, so that's just kind of a little bit of background on it. And that instructions, obviously, those two instructions, 6 and 7, will then repeat instruction 2 of 2017-18, instruction 4 of 2017-18. So those were similar instructions, but obviously they now appealed with this new instruction. Right, that is just, I just quickly just dumped there a table of contents of the National Travel Framework. So obviously most of you might have seen that already. As I said, this thing is already it's been published since July. So it's like, what was that, almost 3 months? No, 2 months, sorry, that it's out there. Right, without further ado, let me hand you over to Lindiwe then, that will take us through it. Lindiwe, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. I think you can stop sharing. Okay. Good morning, colleagues. I think Henry has already briefly touched on the 2 instruction note that we are going to look at. I will not be sharing any presentation, but I think I'll be speaking to the key contents of the 2 instruction note. So maybe if I can start with the instruction note number 6. I think for me, what is key here is to note the purpose of the National Travel Framework. And it says that is to determine minimum norms and standards for official business trips, both domestically and nationally. And then we must also ensure that the utilization of those minimum norms and standards, we do them in a manner which is efficient, cost-effective, transparent, and responsible travel-related arrangements. So one of the key things that one could pick up from the travel framework is that there have not yet been so many changes compared to the previous one. But at the end of the day, one of the key things that one can see from this instruction note is that especially the cost containment one. Number 7 is that the government is trying to make sure that we don't misuse public funds. And I know others can argue that, but then why do you say that whilst we have challenges of corruption, fraud, and all that? But then I think we as the SCM practitioners, we just need to make sure that when we draft our policies in line with the framework, because it's a framework, and you need to make sure that the manner in which you are going to implement it in your institution, you understand the nature and the business of your institution. So for me, I think it's a key thing when it comes to instruction note number 6, the 2 things that I've mentioned around the purpose. And then I have I think it's almost 22 pages, 22 page. It's not a presentation as such, but the comparison that I made between the old framework and the new framework, which is applicable from tomorrow. And maybe we should have had this discussion maybe beginning of August or maybe earlier on, but it's fine. This is where we are today. So the issue of as part of, I'm now on instruction note number 7, the cost containment. The issue of the TMC is still there. We are encouraged that on behalf of the institution, we need to appoint the TMC travel management companies. So in my institution, which is a National Research Foundation, we have appointed TMCs for a period of 3 years. We have appointed 3 of them, and we are using them on a rotational basis. And yeah, the other key thing about, I'm now on the general principles, is that we need to have a relationship with the TMCs, and the travel bookers must make sure that, they always compare the best price of the day for various airline fares, accommodation establishment rates, and car rental before committing or before confirming a booking. So colleagues will notice that on the instruction note, the new one of the, I'll use the word new under air travel. We'll recall that in the previous instruction note, National Treasury indicated to us or did show us the domestic airlines which they have negotiated with. They used to mention them, that SAA, British Airways, and all that. But in this new instruction note, they are silent on which airlines have they negotiated with. They are just saying National Treasury has negotiated with some domestic airlines for upfront discounted airfares for government employees traveling on official business. But then they're saying copies of the agreements are available on request. But then on the same breath, they're saying that due to confidentiality clauses in the agreements, National Treasury cannot publish the discounts in the public domain. So for me, I think it's one of, I can't say surprises, but yeah, it was surprising to me that they did not, they were not specific in terms of the airlines that they have negotiated with, but then they're giving you a discretion as the organ of state that if you want the agreement, you are more than welcome to request it. So I'm not sure from the colleagues who are online, how many have requested the copies of the agreements. I see Mariki's hand is up. Yes, Mariki.
Good morning. Can I just check, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. First of all, thank you for the invitation to join in this session. I really do appreciate that. We have already approached National Treasury, or rather via National Treasury, we really gather that some of these agreements exist, and we've approached Kim Air, for example, and they provided us with the rates that were negotiated with National Treasury, and we are busy loading that on our GDS, or the TMC's GDS system. So that was the route that we followed. We approached the airlines and get the rates from them. So just the other thing that I want to mention, and I think maybe NRF has already done that, remember we can also make use of the PERCO rates, because we are associated members, both CSR and NRF are members. So I spoke to Airlink, for example, because Airlink approached us and they asked us if we can put together a corporate agreement. And ultimately we said we would rather use the PERCO agreement, but the Airlink PERCO agreement has not been signed yet. So I know that it's not been signed yet, so it still needs to be done. Okay. So I'm aware of the Chem Air one, and then we will most probably use the PERCO Airlink contract. Okay.
What about the other airlines like FlySafe and all that? Do you have any info on that?
No, I don't have any info. We are still trying. We don't have any corporate agreements. We are trying to use our TMC agreement to fly SAF Air. But what we realized is we are always booking the lowest class, the cheapest seat, regardless. So very often our bookings are already kind of even below the corporate agreements. So because we found that some of the corporate agreements are, can I say it is loaded? I don't know if that is the right word, but we, the CSI, are by default booking the lowest fare, the cheapest seat possible. Okay, but the moment when I get more information about the airlines, I will share with you, Lindiwe. Okay.
Thank you so much, Marika. I really appreciate that. Any other views from the colleagues? I was not sure, Marika, whether it's you from CSIR. Thank you for joining. And we've been looking for you on the other matter. You know, but we'll discuss.
My pleasure.
Yes.
I don't really have a lot of info on the other matter, but we can talk about that. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Marika. Okay. So colleagues, I'm just going through the instruction note number 7, and I don't want to zoom too much on it. I'm just only highlighting the things that I think they're key. So if we look at the air travel to neighboring countries and regional countries, one of the things that Treasury is saying to us is that for domestic air travel, it must be 5 hours or less, and then we must use economy class. But then they also say that we must use restricted fare types, you know. And from experience, I don't know about you guys, but there has been some challenges with the restricted fare types, because of sometimes you'll experience unforeseen circumstances, and then you've booked a restricted fare, and then if you want to change it, then you'll incur extra cost. Maybe if we can discuss this matter of what are the views of the colleagues on the restricted fare types in terms of the challenges relating to the restricted fare types. Yes, Mariki?
Sorry, Lindiwe, I don't want to take over. If there's anybody else that can also comment. I can just explain what we are doing in our company. We've already adopted the approach of restricted fare type, class type fares in 2010 already. We did an exercise, and at that point in time, we booked full economy class, no restricted fares, so that we can easily change. But the exercise showed us that the full economy, the unrestricted classes are so expensive that if you book the cheapest, lowest restricted class, you can actually do 2 or 3 changes and you still not get to the original price for a full economy flexible ticket. Yes, there are definitely instances where the restricted classes are not available. And then, of course, we will go to the other classes. So that was our experience by default. And the other thing that we realized is that we must understand, based on this instruction note, even the previous instruction notes, that once a booking has been made, all changes will be treated as deviations, and it needs to be scrutinized for possible irregularities, or was it due to negligence, poor bad planning, etc. So yes, we have a very strict process on managing changes, and I can confirm that very often, at the moment when our team receive a request to do a change, that they do not implement the change, we immediately approach our final approver on that specific transaction and inform them that we got the request for a change, and they can approve the change, taking into account that if the change, the additional cost, is due to negligence, personal preference, or poor and bad planning, it might be declared fruitless and wasteful of irregular expenditure. And countless numbers of times, so many times, the traveler will turn around and say, don't change, leave it as is. And then, of course, we save that money. So I can just share our experience. We are for 12 years already doing the cheapest, lowest class, no changes allowed, where, of course, some of the airlines do allow changes now. Yeah, so that's what we are doing. I thought I would just share that.
Okay. So the restricted fare type, you have implemented it across the board?
Across the board, yes.
Okay. Other colleagues? Okay, thank you, Mariki, for sharing those insights with us. So the other thing is around the accommodation. Okay, Henry, your hand is up. Go ahead, Henry. You're
so maybe we
mute.
can keep it for later, Lindiwe, but maybe just to park it in. Just on what Mariki was saying now. So, I mean, on the one hand, we're always encouraged to book early, so to get benefits of the earlier rates of the, the later you book, the more expensive. And so how do you balance that then between, because, so obviously if you book earlier, then you're more prone to change. So there's kind of a tension there between booking earlier then versus the issue of changes. But let's keep that maybe for later on, because something maybe Mariki can they manage it. But let's pick that up later on maybe.
Andy, maybe I can comment now before we forget about that. We measure our average ticket price every month, and to our surprise, we often found that the cheapest price are either 1 to 3 days or 4 to 6 days. Our average ticket price is less, closer to the departure time. Now, this is not something that I want to share. This information is not something I want to share with my travelers, because we encourage them all the time to book in advance. I mean, you're always running into the danger of not getting a seat if you wait 1 to 3 days, and then it becomes an expensive exercise. But it's a fine balance. We do encourage early bookings, but we found that our average ticket price is cheaper, closer to the departure time on domestic travel, of course. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. So I also want us to quickly look at the accommodation, where it says that I'm now on 542. The distance travel, it must exceed 300 kilometers, meaning a return journey from the place of work to the destination. So is it something that all of us, when we do the calculation of the kilometers, do you only take into account from the place of work to the destination, or from home to the destination? Because what happens if your home is in Joburg and you are supposed to travel to, for example, to Bloemfontein, and your place of work is in Pretoria? So obviously, if you calculate the destination from a place of work in Pretoria to Bloem, the kilometers in terms of calculation are going to be more than when you calculate from your home in Joburg to your destination, which is in Bloemfontein. Mariki, any views on that? Do you use?
Yes. Yeah, we use the place of work. Yeah,
Okay.
you know, it is purely because it is less administration, it's much easier to manage, and people move around, and it becomes a very difficult situation to manage things like that. It is just too difficult. So we use the place of work to the destination to determine if overnight accommodation can be applied or not.
Okay. Any views from the colleagues? Are there any colleagues who don't use the place of work, but wherever the person is, they just start to calculate the kilometers? Okay, I don't see any hands. So I think that's what I had on the cost containment, because like I said, some of the things is more or less the same of what is currently happening, or the current is instruction note, which is going to expire midnight today. So Henry, if you can allow me to now go into the framework, and also on the framework, I've just highlighted a key things in terms of the old framework and the current framework. For me, I think what is key now, if you look at there are a couple of acts and relevant related regulations or guidelines that have been included in the travel framework. So we just need to note that because of it means that all these acts are still applicable. And then I think the other key thing that are still emphasizing, even though maybe they might have expanded on it, is the issue of the ethical judgment of travelers and also of approvers. And then the other key thing is the safeguard of the state information and assets while traveling on official business. And we must also make sure that we don't compromise the security or information of the state. Obviously, the delegation of approval, there's very little there that has changed, because at the end of the day, we have different delegated officials within our institutions. Some of us are public 3A, public 3B or 3C institutions, and others are national departments, others are provincial departments. And then the issue of the general principles for the travelers, there's been very little change when it comes to that. And then also the issue of having to visit the clinic where vaccination and all those things is required, especially now with the COVID. I think we have a lot of lessons learned when it comes to COVID. I've already indicated that in our institutions, we have appointed 3 travel agencies, and we are using them on a rotational basis. The appointment was done in an open and competitive manner. And then when it comes to the air travel, I think also because of maybe to a larger extent, the lesson learned on COVID, and the fact that I can have a meeting with someone in Europe while I'm in South Africa, is the fact that you see that on the new framework, they're saying that air travel should only be undertaken after remote communication tools such as teleconferencing and video conferencing have been considered. Institutions, through the authorizing official travel bookers, must make every attempt to reduce travel costs by comparing the cost advantage of using alternative communication tools. So this one, I think, like you said, Mariki, the checks and balances that you have put in place when it comes to the restricted phase. So here, one of the key things that I think Treasury is saying to us is that before you could approve the request for a traveler to travel, you must have made sure that you have exhausted all the remote communication tools which are available. And then if you've done everything that you need to do, then is the only time that you can approve the request for travel. And then the issue of the timelines in terms of the 5 hours and all that, I don't think we need to zoom into that because of, I think it's still applicable. But then when it comes to the accommodation, you'll see that there has been a little bit of the increase in terms of the cost with regard to a domestic accommodation, and that has been included as part of the annexure. And then the kilometers, I don't have to repeat because we've already touched on them. But then over and above the annexure of, let me look for it. The annexure of accommodation, the negotiated rates or the minimum rates that our TMCs can use. National Treasury, I see your hand, Marika, I'll come to you. National Treasury, when it comes to domestic travel, domestic accommodation, they are also encouraging us that as an institution, we can enter into our own agreements through obviously the normal procurement process with accommodation facilities to secure rates that are lower than the maximum allowable rates prescribed by National Treasury. So there's nothing stopping us as institutions to also go into or use our own procurement processes to appoint other accommodation facilities, as long as the rates are lower than the maximum allowable rates as prescribed by National Treasury. And then the other key thing is that we just need to make sure that the standard of class for domestic accommodation must at least be a minimum of a 3-star establishment. Mariki?
Thank you, Lindiwe. Okay, let me just quickly gather my thoughts. Oh yeah, the issue of now I forgot what I wanted to say. You spoke about the determination if all other avenues have been exhausted before you book a flight ticket. Have you any idea how you guys are going to do that? That's for me, it's the same thing. Like many years ago, we got that gap analysis, the cost containment instruction note, the other cost containment instruction note, not this one. In the other cost containment instruction note, they talk about the appointment of consultants, I think, and you need to do a gap analysis before you appoint a consultant. So it is also one of those difficult ones. So yes. How will you monitor if you get a request for an overseas trip that it can't be done by Skype or by MS Teams or Zoom or whatever? I think it's a very difficult thing to monitor, and ultimately we might just add a question on our approval template to say, confirm that this must be a face-to-face interaction, or it can't be done virtually or something like that. I don't know. I would like to understand how that, if any of the colleagues have a different idea.
Yeah, I think it's a very important question that you're asking, Mariki, because the other thing about it, when I look at it, it can also be subjective to a certain extent, because, for example, let's say I'm working, or the person that I'm reporting to, maybe we have, for example, let's say a strained relationship. They don't want me to travel and all that. You see, they'll make sure that, even if I have justifiable reasons to travel, but then they can make it hard for me to say that, no, you can still use teleconferencing, you can still use video conferencing and all that. But then I'm just trying to think loud based on the practicalities, what is really happening on the ground. We do have such people, whether we like it or not. But then let's hear the other colleagues in terms of how are they going to ensure that they comply with the 11.1.1 of the framework. Or others, if they've done it in the past, maybe they can share with us lessons learned, how they have done it. I see on the call I see my old colleague Selby, very happy to see you, Selby Maboya. Maybe you can share with us, Selby. I used to work with Selby many years ago.
Good morning, colleagues. You know, I just joined this meeting on invitation. I have been out of the space for quite some time. So I've just recently joined a new organization, NHFC, and I just came to understand how this process will be implemented. That not that in my recent, employment have I applied this regulation. So I just came to learn more than anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Selby, for your honesty and welcome. Colleagues, can you share with us your views on how are you going to ensure that you implement or Mutlong Lekotla? You can go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am. And good morning to other colleagues. Colleagues, I think what will be very critical is to look at the purpose of the journey. And I'll make an example. If you were to receive a requisition that states that official is going to maybe deliver the asset scanner from one province to another, I mean, definitely we do have an alternative in the sense that we can courier the scanner from head office to the provincial offices, and then using a courier services will be a cost effective because it costs far lesser than booking a flight from head office to the provinces and accommodation and so on and so forth. Like as the chair indicated to say, there will be a number of things that need to be considered, but I think number one, it should be what is the purpose of the journey. Then we need to take it from there. Thank you. That would be my submission, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate the input. Any other input from the colleagues?
Lindiwe, if there's no other comments on that specific point.
Yes, Mariki, go.
My biggest challenge or comment around the new travel policy framework is the subsistence, the travel and subsistence allowances. I don't know if you're still going to get to that or if I should raise it now. You just give me guidance because I've got a real issue there.
Yeah, if you can allow me to go through what I have prepared for this session, and then we'll take it from there. Is it fine?
It's totally fine, no problem whatsoever. No,
thank you.
Fine.
Mutlo, can I request that maybe you lower your hand or do you have any additional thing? Okay, thank you. So I also want to talk about a private accommodation because it says that I can choose when I go. Yes, Henry.
I've tried to share a few times when you went in. Can you maybe share with the colleagues in terms of the references to the framework or whatever? Just might be easier for people to follow in terms of the actual document that you sometimes talk through, if possible. But
yeah, I don't think it's going to be possible, Henry, because of I'm not always referring exactly to it.
No worries.
I'm cross-referencing to other. I'm cross-referencing to other documents. Yes.
Okay.
But then I take it that the colleagues have read the framework. Monica, your hand is up.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, colleagues. You know, before we pass this issue of supply chain heads or departments requesting or declining submissions from departments in terms of traveling, in a situation where the traveling has to be made, the request is from your executives, how are we given powers to even decline executives' request on their traveling where they believe that they do not want to do online sessions and so forth and so forth? Maybe you can guide me on that so that I know the approach on how to resolve such issues.
Okay, thank you, Monica. I see Mamonet's hand is up. Maybe she has an answer for you, Mamone.
Thank you, Lindiwe. Thank you, colleagues. This is just a suggestion. I think the logical approach would be to see if either form of engagement, be it virtual or in a contact, one should ask themselves if the objective for the meeting will be achieved either way. And if the objective for the meeting will be achieved through virtual session, then it is fully justifiable to approve the virtual session and decline the actual travel.
Okay, do you have an answer? Thank you. Do you have an answer for Monica's question? Because if I understand Monica correctly, she's saying that the approval of whether to travel or not, it goes through their supply chain management. And I know that in other entities, not everything will go through the SCM. Perhaps like the manager of the traveler will be the one who approve the request to travel or the principal to travel. And thereafter, the SCM process will follow after that. Thandi?
Good morning. Thanks, Lindiwe. You know what Monica is saying, this is purely an issue of system of delegation. There are financial delegation and the non-financial delegation. And I think that what one can do, you know, on our requisitions, we'll usually put some checkbox and tick boxes of some sort. Maybe what one can do on the checkbox or somewhere on the form is to indicate that that issue of saying other methods other than traveling has been explored, and maybe provide an explanation into to say, I like the gentleman who made an example about a courier service, whereby there should be a paragraph or something where they explain to say, we have explored 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is the reason why we are not going for it. Because these are the things that get supply chain into trouble, where we are put at risk of having to make decisions that management is supposed to make on our behalf. Our job is to buy. And that should be done by somebody above who's supposed to make a decision on. But all I'm saying is that on our template, on the form, let there be a paragraph that talks to, have you explored other mechanism? And if the answer is yes, explain, and then you can go for this one. Thank you.
So thank you, Thandi. So what you're saying is that if the traveler has ticked yes, you don't have to go into a inverted commas, mini investigation as the SCM practitioner to try and understand and articulate the reasons as to why they cannot use a visual platforms and there's a need for them to travel. So you leave it at the discretion of the traveler to say that I need to travel, full stop. You don't have to go into nitty-gritties of the reasons for traveling as the SCM practitioner.
Correct, because remember, as a traveler, there would be someone above or a senior that would have approved your travel anyway. You don't just wake up and just bring something to supply chain. There's a system. That's why I'm saying that this is a non-financial delegation. So if I'm a manager, I'm requesting a travel, maybe my senior manager or my executive would have approved my travel. And upon approving my travel, I would have explained to say, I explored, this is the reason why I'm traveling, and this is the paragraph that I'm talking to. I remember one municipality I worked for, we had a form for deviation. It was like a form that one have to complete. I think this is one thing that maybe a form or a required paragraph that would have to be put in, whereby the approver of my travel would have approved that this method has been explored and therefore is not working. Because honestly, these are the things that get supply chain practitioners into trouble. And once that is done, once that has been approved, my job is to buy. Can I buy? If questions are asked, DDG so or executive so or manager so gave approval on this thing, therefore my job was just to execute. Thank you.
Thank you, Thandi. But then, don't you think that's what makes other people to see SCM as just a rubber stamp? Am I not supposed to apply my mind and question? But that's a discussion for another day, Thandi. Thank you for the input. Before I go to Mamone, I just want to allow Tebello and then Mamone and then Monica.
Thank you, colleague. I tend to agree with my previous colleague who just spoke. Approval and authorization is purely within the confines of financial delegations. when items get to the practitioner, you should have gone through a process of approval to say this has been initiated, it has been reviewed, it has been authorized, therefore I can go ahead and source whatever quotations that you require. But it cannot be that the practitioner has to make decisions of this nature, you know, and review and authorize. You are not there to review, you are there to execute what has been already authorized. In fact, this discussion is really more of an organizational discussion. It should be taken as a policy of the organization in terms of how you approve and review, you know, travel. And it cannot be left down to supply chain to be looking at this and say, how do we implement this thing? Yes, there are aspects within it that will guide what we need to do. But in terms of policy, this is really within the policy of the organization, and it should be looked at that level. Otherwise, you're just putting practitioners at unnecessary harm.
Thank you, Tebello, for your views. Mamone, and thereafter Monica.
Thank you again, Lindiwe, for the platform. I think I truly definitely agree with Thandi. However, even if we would use a checklist, that would sort of, you know, make us comfortable when we buy. As much as our responsibilities as procurement personnel is to buy, you also have the responsibility to buy responsibly.
Yes.
You may have gone through the checklist. So my suggestion would be, yes, as part of the checklist, one of the boxes to tick would then be whatever form of procurement has been chosen. Will that form of procurement serve the objective of what needs to be procured? Maybe that can then be added into the checklist, because at the end of the day, the procurement personnel will be held accountable to buy irresponsibly, because part of our job is also make sure that as we buy, we make sure that we contain costs.
Thank you for
Thanks.
that. Monica, and then Marika, I saw your hand was also up. You can go ahead, Monica.
Okay, thank you so much for all your inputs, but I believe some of the colleagues will share the same frustrations with us. As from what I'm hearing, the processes, I believe, might be similar in all the organizations, but let's assume the management or whoever has been delegated with powers of approving, for example, international travel, has approved. Then whatever document will then come to supply chain for supply chain to implement. My challenge is in a situation where the highest authority has approved, and you still do not believe as a practitioner that the traveling should take place. They should then resort to alternative routes. It becomes very challenging for you to be that person, because you'll be seen as a person who's now not being effective. A person is stumbling block to people doing their jobs. So it's a hard one, but I take your inputs, and I think all of us will try by all means to at least have controls to protect ourselves as supply chain practitioners in terms of these kinds of challenges. But it's really very challenging.
I think my advice, thank you, colleague Monica. I think my advice to you will be, try to balance what Mamone, Tebello, and Thandi has said in your processes. You need to have that balance between the two. Because you also don't want, like rightfully like what you said, you also don't want to be seen as a stumbling block. Don't just be a compliance driven, but try to strike a balance between the business requirements or the business needs and a SCM compliance. I think if you can be able to strike that balance, then you won't have a sleepless nights or worrying that at the end of the transaction, you as the SCM practitioner, you'll be on the wrong side of the auditors and all that. So for me, I think striking a balance between the two, then you'll be good to go. Colleagues, we are left with 15 minutes, and I really need to go at 11 because I have another engagement exactly at 11. I was talking about the private accommodation, and it's on 12.5, Henry, of the framework. I'm not sure to what extent that other institutions allow their travelers to use a private accommodation. For example, I'm traveling to Eastern Cape, therefore I don't need to sleep at a hotel, but I opt to sleep at my uncle's place or my aunt's place or my grandparents' place. I know one of the institutions that I used to work for, if you use private accommodation, there was a specific minimum amount that they will allow you as a, yeah, there was an allowance for private accommodation, and it was standard across the board. I'm not sure how the other colleagues are approaching the private accommodation. Do you reimburse your travelers for using private accommodation, or you don't? Mariki?
Thanks, Lindiwe. We will reimburse them according to standard practices for standard S&T, but nothing for the accommodation. It was their choice to stay at private accommodation. We regard it as a saving to the organization, of course, but we don't pay them any additional money for staying there. But they've got all the rights to claim their standard S&T.
Okay. Yeah, I think the institution that I used to work for, it's also apply the same principle.
Yeah.
Other views from colleagues? I can't see if whether your hand is up. Okay, I want us to look at 13.4, Henry, use of private vehicles. What happens, it's a question that I have for the colleagues who works for national departments. What happens if the traveler's car is part of the scheme that where they get cars on discount already, the government is reimbursing them, and then they're using that car for official business. It's not a private, it's a private car, but however, partly financed by government. In those instances, how do you handle the issue of claiming for kilometers and all that? Any views? So none of you on the call are using the scheme that I'm referring to. It used to be there in government, so I'm not sure if whether is it still there or not. Okay, I think, Henry, we can move to Nandipa. The hand is up. You can go ahead.
Thank you, Lindy. Lindy, are you referring to subsidized vehicles?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, my experience has been, let me start with the previous one that we're on. And in my previous life, you were actually allowed to use an accommodation that is not necessarily hotels, but then there was a rate that was used. Because if you look at it, at the end of the day, there are places where you will not have hotels. You will have just other places that you can use. Coming to this one, a subsidized vehicle, it depends on what the form of subsidization, because we had categories. But the truth of the matter is that kilometers are kilometers. Unless you're talking about what we used to call in the homelands a government garage car, a government vehicle. That one then where even the petrol and everything it comes out of government. That's a different thing. But if it's a private one and you are actually paying for everything, the kilometers are kilometers. Remember that the kilometers are not only about you, it's how you actually then account in terms of SARS. So for me, the kilometer issue does not change because it's an accounting mechanism. And it also depends on the category of the subsidy of the subsidization. In my previous life, we had various categories. But in all categories, you were to actually fill your travel book, which then translates in your claim as in terms of kilometers. That has been my experience. And it makes your life easy when it comes to then the issues of SARS, because that's the same thing that you take to SARS. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am, for that. Henry, I was on 14.3. I just wanted to bring to the attention of the colleagues the non-reimbursable expenses. I think it's more or less the same as the old framework. Yes. So this is something which is a standard, and I know that the colleagues are aware of. Do you have any comments that you want to make on this 14.3.1, colleagues? Okay, if there are no comments, Henry, I'll request that we move to 14.10.
Lindy, can I ask something?
Yes, Nandipa, I didn't see your hand.
Can you go back to that list? And of course, I'm using my previous experience there. There's a matter that is raised around phones. Yes, your personal phone, okay.
Personal phone calls.
Okay, it's personal phone calls. Okay.
Yes, not private. Yeah.
Okay. The private traveling. The question is, how then would you define private? Okay. Private traveling is what? Is when you are not going official, or when you are not using an official vehicle. What is private traveling?
It's
I'm
exactly
asking,
how.
for example,
yeah.
if you are attending a funeral, that could be defined as private. And I'm looking at the applicability of this in the whole government, because it can create a number of nuances in some organizations, especially the one that I was in, because all these things, they are part of your submission when you are making a submission. And that is why the debate that was earlier about supply chain, looking at whether I use virtual or not. For me, that debate belongs to the principals when they approve, not to supply chain. That's what I wanted to say. At some point, we must differentiate between decisions that belong to somewhere, because when the submission is done, someone must make the call, not supply chain. Otherwise, you are burdening supply chain with things that belong to executives in terms of them making that call. Now, this one, I'm then talking about then the issues of private traveling. Secondly, the internet connectivity. How are you going to deal with for example, let's take COVID, for example. COVID, you are in your own space, you had to use your own connectivity, but you were doing official things. I'm looking at the thin line of how, in fact, even for such purposes, there's still a challenge in terms of how then do you designate an office that is at home or operating from home in terms of the requirements, in terms of the tax laws. So if this is allowed to go without a real scrutiny, the challenge is going to be the application of it at the detriment of effectiveness, right? And I go to overweight again. Overweight package, especially when you are traveling, and I'm talking about the experience. If you are, for example, you are carrying strategic plans, as I used to, you are bound to have an overweight. and I can see when they say it's due to official business purposes. But there are instances where you will find that the overweight is, how should I put it? 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 The overweight, is it just unqualified? Is it, how, I don't know how to put this, because there are instances where the overweight can be private, but the reason is official. And I'm talking about the experience that I went through, and I'm saying, if these are not scrutinized, they might create problems in some quarters. That's what I'm saying. So I'm advising that look closely at them, and you look at how you triangulate between them and the requirements in terms of tax laws, because all these things, they link together. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Ma'am Nandipa, for your inputs. I see another person's hand is up, but I don't know. I can't clearly see who the person is.
It's Motlong.
Henry.
It's
You know, it was mine initially, I think.
It's more Motlong and Thandi, yes. Motlong first and then Thandi.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think I will concur with the previous speaker, Chair, to say, look, we need to scrutinize as a supply chain management specialist, and we need to advise. I mean, like example, on that example that she made of the private traveling, if you receive a claim with the kilometers claimed, I will know probably maybe from Pretoria to Polokwane, chances are maybe the 700 kilometers. It's very easy for me to get to Google and check the distance between Pretoria to Polokwane. But if I were to receive the claim with Pretoria to Polokwane 1,400 kilometers, I process it as it is. That simply means I did not scrutinize, I did not apply my mind, because I will know that that won't be possible. Then from there, it's only then that will then say, look, I've traveled from Pretoria to Polokwane, I worked there. But now that originally I'm from Polokwane, then I decided to go to vendor at home and then come back. That simply means we are going to reimburse you from the Pretoria to Polokwane, but we are not going to reimburse you for whatever the cost that we use between Pretoria to your home at vendor and so on and so forth. That simply means you scrutinize that document. And then it goes back to the issue that colleagues have actually been talking about, the issue of the approvals and authorizations. For me, colleagues, is the issue that when the accounting officer and the budget manager, they actually approved to say that the needs were identified. And they're saying that those needs or goods and services that were identified, I'm approving that, yes, it is important for the organization or the entity to go out and procure those goods and services. I'm approving again to say that funds are available to procure those required goods and services. But however, the issue of the method of procurement is still lies with the supply chain management, that you say which method of procurement that I'm going to use to procure those required and identified goods and services. If official will require to hire a vehicle to go to Vereeniging, from Pretoria to Vereeniging, while there is a fleet of vehicles available within the organization, it's within the supply chain management to advise to say that I'm not going to allow a car rental, because alternatively, I'm recommending that you use one of the fleet vehicles that are available from the organization. So that also means that we are in the position to be able to advise. You will recall that as an supply chain management, we are a support service. So we are required to add value to the organization. Those are some of the things that we have to do in order to be seen as we are adding value. At the end of the day, it still goes back to that issue that I've raised earlier to say, the method of procurement is within us, because we are the ones that have to make sure that the manner that we procure goods and services, we procure in a manner that is cost effective, that is fair, that is open, and that is actually been adding value to the organization. So that's why I still believe that, yes, I might not be overruling the decision of accounting officer and a budget manager, but it's still within us to make sure that we advise them, because they only approve for the procurement of goods, identified goods and services to be procured. They only approve to say funds are available, but they don't really approve the method of procurement to use. They don't really approve to ensure that goods are procured in a manner that is cost effective and does add value to the organization. Thank you, Chair. That will be my submission.
Thank you so much, Mutlong. And I like what you said about us scrutinizing, applying our minds, because we have a recent case, colleagues, and all of you are aware of it. Skinny jeans were bought for Tembisa Hospital, and the transaction was processed by SCM. None of the SCM people asked that we are a hospital. Why are we buying skinny jeans for the hospital? So I agree, we need to apply our minds as SCM. We can't just be a post office clerks and just process transaction because of the decision was taken somewhere else. Therefore, we don't have to apply our minds. We can just, issue the purchase order for skinny jeans, whereas we know that skinny jeans has absolutely nothing to do with our business. Henry, I'm late for my other meeting, so I'm not sure how do you want us to proceed. I also take note of the fact that there's something that Mariki wanted us to look at, but then I think maybe I can allow you maybe to look, maybe let's look at the loyalty programs. And also I was very much interested in us also discussing the issue around the sponsored official trips. Yeah, those are the sponsored trips under 14.10. Those are the things that I wanted us to discuss. The use of the loyalty programs and upgrades, and also what is it that you suggested that we speak about, Mariki? Just remind me. Are you still there?
Yes, Lindiwe. Now, I wanted to raise an issue about the actual S&T allowances, or let me rather call it accommodation rates. And we've got a very specific challenge, and I was just wondering if some of the other colleagues have the same challenge and how they've managed the challenge. So
okay,
I can raise it now if you want to, but I know you need to go.
So I think Lindiwe sounds like Lindiwe needs to leave now.
Yes, I'm already 2 minutes late.
We should reschedule maybe just on the back of another topic to pick up some of the other points when we schedule again, seeing that Lindiwe needs to leave now.
But some of the other colleagues are still here. Maybe I can just quickly raise, and maybe some of the other colleagues can maybe give me some advice.
Okay,
they have similar experience.
Lindiwe, thank
you.
We will still be on for a while, but thank you for your time. Really appreciate it as always.
Okay,
thank you very much. Okay.
Bye, colleagues.
Thanks, Lindiwe. Okay, if I can raise my issue.
Right, Mariki.
Okay. In the previous instruction notes, there was this specific rates, like for example, 1,400 Rand per night for bed and breakfast and parking and S&T and everything. So we then implement a very strict process in our organization where, for example, a one-night accommodation cannot exceed 1,100 Rand because there still needs to be room under the 1,400 Rand for the S&T, etc., etc., etc. Now, the previous instruction note was silent on VAT inclusive or exclusive. So at the time, we got clarity from National Treasury that we can regard those rates as excluding of VAT. That's what we've implemented for the last number of years. Now, the new instruction note is very clear that it is inclusive of VAT. So even though they've increased the rates, we've got a unique situation now that, as a matter of fact, our rates have now been reduced because of now suddenly it is VAT inclusive, while we were used to the fact that our rates are VAT exclusive. So I'm not sure how the
almost like 50% less now. More than 50%.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if other institutions have the same or similar kind of challenge. It's quite a shock for our travelers. They are very upset because they actually approached us already to ask if we can increase the rates, but now we need to tell them we're actually decreasing it. So that's the unique challenge that we have. My other challenge, of course, is we've never used hours to determine if somebody is entitled to S&T. We use the principle if you sleep out, if you are out of your home place of home for a night, one night sleep.
That's overnight.
You are in,
Overnight,
yeah,
basically.
overnight. Then you get S&T. Now there's no mentioning of that we need to count hours. What I do like is the fact that if you leave before 6 and you arrive after 8 at night, that you are entitled to 1 day's S&T. That part I do like, because I always felt it was unfair for somebody who's leaving at 4 o'clock in the morning to be at the airport by 5 to leave at 6, not to even have a cent for a sami at the airport or a cool drink or something like that. So I do like that change. But for me, yeah, I'm not sure how we are going to implement this counting of hours. I don't know how the others are doing that, and I would love to hear from them. Thank
Okay,
you.
so let's open up and see if there are any hands. Somebody suggest how they do it, or they have some challenges.
Maybe they don't have similar challenges.
Nandipa.
Thank you, Mariji. I actually I'm excited, because what you find as a challenge in my previous life, that's how your SEO calculations were made in terms of the number of hours, to a point where you had to indicate the time when you left, because exactly what you're saying, which you're saying is new. So I find it exciting that that particular organization was able to implement that. And I think it's a question of supply chain, should I say the osmotic motion around these issues, because I think it makes sense that you use the timing. I never understood it till at some point I sat down, and then I understood why they are doing that, because you need a form of precision in doing it. So I'm just going to say to you, it's still amongst you. There are people who are already doing it amongst yourselves. They must just assist in terms of how they do it, in terms of traveling.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I think our challenge is the checks and balances that needs to be implemented. So if I arrive at the airport at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm driving from Joburg to Pretoria, and on my way I stop to do my shopping, and I arrive at home after 8, who's going to monitor that? So it will be a case of us checking. Your flight landed at 4 o'clock. We allow you 2 hours to get home. So you are at home at 6, so we're not going to reimburse you because you did not get home at after 8. I think that's kind of the, I think I'm trying to look for a solution that's easier to implement than checking on each and every traveler. Are you truthful? Are you honest? Did you really travel that time? Did you really leave your house at that and that and that? So I think those are the kind of things that we try not to be so pedantic with our travelers. But thank you for that.
Maybe, Mariki, I get your point. It's about then the ethics within the people. I mean, for example, if when I was traveling, my PA would actually take. I would literally communicate when I land get to the airport, when I leave, the time is taken. When I get to the airport, the time is taken. When I land, the time is taken. When I land back, the time is taken. And you get used to it actually, but it could be a lot of work for some people. But we in that organization, we're doing it all the time, and it also helps you in cases of alibis, by the way, because if you're saying you were in Cape Town at the airport and someone raises a matter that you were in Joburg, there's an element of a challenge in that particular thing. So I'm saying, yes, you are right. It's about then the ethics in the culture of ethics being then domesticated within the people.
Yeah.
But in terms of managing it, it's something that can be done.
Thank you for that. Is there anybody else who had a challenge on this excluding and including of VAT on the rates? Or are we always implementing excluding of VAT? Or inclusive?
Rather inclusive, yeah. Inclusive.
Yeah.
Seems everybody else did it inclusive previously.
Okay.
On the group, yeah.
Yeah, I think
Charlene's just raised her hand. It's your chance.
Hi everyone. Sorry, it's Charlene here from PPECB, Perishable Products Export Control Board. I'm not involved in the procurement side of things, but I handle our TMC and our travel at PPECB. So just with regards to your query, Marikia, it's very valid because we've also always taken it that it was inclusive of that. And so thank you very much for pointing that out, because that's also something we're going to need to discuss, because we also got very excited when we kind of saw that the rates were going up, because we battling, especially with a lot of our guys go to remote places. So, we're using a lot of the room only rates, and then people are claiming, the SNT. Because they're on the road like constantly and going to some, very rural areas or, far out areas. So it's good to know and to take that into consideration, because we've also done it that it's, it's inclusive of that. Yeah, so thanks.
Charlene, we are in the same situation. A lot of travelers to all weird and wonderful places doing field work.
No, with regards to the hours, I mean, I haven't really given, kind of focused on that, but I would think, as you say, it does rely on people being, honest. But I would think if someone's catching a flight, if they are catching a flight at 6 o'clock, I mean, there's a definite need that they would need to leave their home, by 4 o'clock to get to the airport. So you kind of know that side of thing is a given. But obviously when they get to the other side, that's where you, as you say, someone can land at 4 and go and do their shopping and get home at 8 and then claim. But maybe we could, we could base it on when the person lands, because then that is when their business is complete. Yeah, I don't know.
I hear you. Okay. Yeah, that's something to consider. Thank you for that. And good luck with the reduced rate.
Yes, I know. Not happy about that.
Right. Any other comments, things that you wanted to pick up? I think this loyalty program must probably want to get Lindiwe back to touch on a few of the other things that she picked up, but we can do that as a piggybacking on another session. If not, then I'm going to suggest that we end the session.
Henry, Nandipa's hand is up.
Nandipa, is that the previous or still your hand still up?
No, it's not the previous. It's another.
Okay.
It's a new one.
Apologies.
Henry, it will be very much suicidal that the person was traveling from home to the airport, but when he's coming back, you think the journey ends at the airport. It cannot be. Yeah. So we really need to make sure that we take the full journey. And if a person, and we need to trust the people. Let's say the person on the way, the person meets an accident and arrives at home 3 hours. Yes, he arrived 3 hours. So I'm saying that's an element of trust that we must also have, and not always be thinking that people are out to.
Totally agree.
I'm begging.
No, totally agree with that, Nandipa. Really, I agree with the trust issue. Thank you.
Thanks. I see Ron's hand is up there. Good morning, Ron.
Hello, Henry. Thanks for taking over from Lindiwe. Henry, I just want to make a general comment, which I've made in the past, but it's corroborated by today's session. And that's just the way National Treasury does things. The fact that people have so many basic queries are issues that National Treasury should provide a forum to resolve. Now, National Treasury, with the National Treasury framework, were actually highly commendable. It was the first time that I know that they actually called for a working group from entities initially. and they actually took into account, the contributions of the various entities. So it was highly consultative and highly commendable in terms of process. Where this session, I think, provides evidence of them failing is that they haven't continued with that. So prior to the release of this instruction note, what would have been consistent with their values, and just to repeat, consultation is a formal value of National Treasury. So prior to the release of this instruction note, it would be in everybody's interest, including National Treasury, to have released the draft for consultation, and then picked up any gaps and then included it in the actual final document. And I would suggest, Henry, that maybe this forum engages with National Treasury. In terms of their consultation process, I do believe that it is, it leaves, there are gaps and it leaves things to be desired. And I believe part of it is unconstitutional in terms of our rights. Thanks, Henry.
Thank you, Ron. Just maybe I might just add that Sean actually invited representatives of National Treasury to this platform earlier. And then again, this morning, he again sent out another reminder, just please, if those people can attend. So yeah, acknowledge what you're saying. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, seeing that, so I want to propose then that we then close the session today, seeing that we're already kind of 20 minutes almost over the time. And we can pick maybe one or two of these things up. Also on the platform, on that collaboration platform, the Telegram platform, any comments you can maybe just questions you can raise on there, and we can also then between me and Sean try and get those questions and things through to National Treasury. Thank you then, and thanks for all the participation, for all